Welcome. This is Richard Clarke with
And
Hot
with today.
Science with the week's top news in science, technology, and medicine. Welcome. And to give an overview of what we're going to be talking about today, first, I have a couple of EV stories, and these are both low-end EVs, which I think are the actual wave of the future. The first is about the Microlino 2.0, and it's an all-electric bubble car that is now uh, heading towards production, and it will be somewhere uh, 13 or $14,000 retail. And then the Tasso Tiago EV is coming from India, and it has received overwhelming response with over 10,000 orders the first day that they were taking them. So I think that's a pretty good first day sale. And that is on the market in India for under $10,000. The environmental story is going to be a long, detailed story, and it's about what they call the great progression that is they're forecasting is going to happen in the next 25 years. The material story is another story on graphene and how graphene is going to boost flexible and wearable electronics. And then in astronomy, the Arecibo telescope, which collapsed in a hurricane 2 years ago, will not be rebuilt. And astronomers are heartbroken. And in biology, Oxford University has found that goldfish have good memories.
Sorry.
That's good. I thought it was amusing too.
Oh, yeah.
And in anthropology, I have a story that was sent me by Bob Coaches, and it is how ancient humans were apex predators for 2 million years. So, if you're looking for what is a diet that is natural to humans, it might be it includes eating meat. And then the last story is that, oh, I printed the wrong story. The story I printed was that, and that I'm ready to talk about, is how Pfizer expects now to hike the US price for COVID vaccine to $110 to $130 per dose. So the days of the inexpensive COVID vaccines, it looks like they're over. And so now let me start with the Microlino, and I have a picture of this new car coming from Europe, and look at that. This is a tiny car. It's got a four-wheeler. You open the door in front to get in it, and the company, they're offering at the same time a three-wheel electric scooter. And what they show on the right is how the company started to begin with one of the first electric scooters. And so this is an electric scooter that grew up to be a tiny car. And so this is from a Swiss manufacturer named Micro, and it's actually the second generation of their all-electric monoliner, and it resembles more than anything else an Isetta. Remember those? Those also had a door in front that you opened to get into, and uh, it's got a lot of power. It has an 11 kilowatt electric motor. How far would that take your Tesla there, Norman? And on a full charge, uh, it will go about 125 miles. So it actually has a good range. It doesn't take much battery power to drive that car. The car without people is about 1,100 pounds. So it's pretty small. It has a top speed of more than 55 miles an hour.
Wow. Oh.
And that's still, if you're driving around Lakeside, that would be enough unless you wanted to go to Costco, and that'd be pretty slow on the road to Costco. And the the retail price would be about $13,000, 12,000 euros, and it seats two, and there's a premium version that has a sunroof, and uh, the production will start next year in Italy. And you saw the picture of the Scudo. That's the Microletta, the 3-year wheeled electric scooter. It's going to sell for $5,000. So for $5,000, you could get an electric scooter, or for twice that, you could get the tiny electric car. So, any comments about the Microlino?
It does look just like an Isetta.
Yes, it does. And, certainly I think that would work fine around here as long as I didn't have many friends to ride in it with me.
What they don't say is anything about the crash testing and what happens to the crash test dummies when it gets hit by a F-150.
Uh-huh. Well, the one thing about it, as opposed to the next thing we'll talk about, is it went on sale in Europe, and Europe has pretty tough safety standards, tougher, I think, than the US. So I suspect that they had to meet European standards.
The European standards for 50cc or whatever it is, low horsepower vehicles, is very loose. For normal cars, it's very stringent.
Right. Well, again, I don't know where this sits. There are little European uh, vehicles that won't go more than 30 miles an hour that have these to the standards you were talking about, Norman. And the other thing about those little vehicles in Europe is you don't have to have driver's license, so your teenage kid can drive them around town before they have a driver's license. I think this you have to have a driver's license for.
And no doubt it's safer than a motorcycle or a moped. So
That's right. I think it's definitely going to be safer than that thing, the three-wheeled motorbike, electric motorbike.
Well, Andrew, that's the same argument that Tata made when they came out with the Nano. Not that it's a perfect car, but it's much better than loading 4 people on a scooter.
That's right. Or 5 or 6 people. I think the most I saw was 6 people, and 3 of those were little kids. Now that you're speaking about Tata, that gets us into the next story. And let me show you a video. This is the Tata Tiago EV. And let me get the video up here.
Tata Motors has already shown us that it's all guns blazing or nothing when it comes to the electric vehicle. Tata Motors has already shown us that it's all guns blazing or nothing when it comes to the electric vehicles. But before we got the Nexon EV, the Nexon EV Max or the Tigor EV, we had a rumor that they'd be launching this, the Tata Tiago EV. The Tiago has just about everything you'd want from a small car. A good name, nice looks, a sensible interior, and a lot of gizmos to play around with. And here is how it's gone electric. First, the big question. It's a small car, so what kind of electric range can you realistically expect? Now, for context, the Tigor EV and the standard Nexon EV, they have a claimed range of just over 300 kilometers, while the Nexon EV Max, that claims about 437 kilometers. The Tiago.EV is available with 2 battery pack options, 19.2 and 24 kilowatt hours, with claimed range figures ranging between 250, that's 250, and 315 kilometers. Now, we'll have to take it for a drive in the real world to see what that means for you in the real world, but based on our past experience, you're realistically looking at a range of between 150 and 170 kilometers. Now, with range figures like this, let's face it, this is going to be a largely city-focused hatchback. But let's pick one thing clear. If you are looking at getting the Tiago EV, just get the bigger battery pack. Aside from getting the range benefit, it also has a bit more performance, more power, a little bit more torque, and a quicker 0 to 60 time, if that matters to you.
So, charge options. There's the portable charger that works with the same plugs you'd use for your refrigerator or AC.
So this is the Tata Tiago, and as I say, its first day orders were for 10,000. It starts off with a price that is below $10,000. So it actually in India is cheaper than the Microlino, and it's a hatchback. You can sit 4 people in it just fine. What I suspect with the Tato Nano, which came out about 10 years ago and started for sale at about $2,000, they didn't import this real low-cost car into America or Europe because they didn't meet any of the safety standards. I don't know if this one meets the safety standards or not. If I was Tato, I certainly would have thought about designing it for the broader market, because I think for me, as I look at that car for $10,000, then if I could get one now, whether it met any safety standards or not, I would buy it today. It certainly would meet my needs here living lakeside. And what else do we have about it? Shipments have not started yet. They're not quite sure when they're going to start. They're still working out supply chain details. But I think these 2 vehicles together show one of the things that's going to be the big trend in EVs. I wish I knew what the inexpensive one from the Chinese manufacturers are. What's the BYD? You know what the BYD equivalent is, Norman? Or do they have one?
I'm sure that BYD does. They have a very complete line of electric vehicles. And of course, they ship much more than Tesla does.
Right. Right. And BYD is trying to move into Europe, so I think at least some of their models must meet European safety standards. So I think these two, I showed them today because I think that's showing where a lot of the EV market is going. Notice that they had, in comparison to Tesla, just a little battery. I think the biggest Tata battery is about a third the size of your Tesla battery. And much of the cost for these things is in the batteries. And if you don't need as big a battery, you don't need as big a cost. So I think this kind of stuff will be EVs for the rest of us.
Mhm.
I think too, the Tesla weighs about 3 times as much
Right.
as
Yes.
these tiny cars, so it needs more power. But in Hehick, could you buy a golf cart and drive it around, or
Yes.
are they
Yes.
not legal?
Yes, there are people, I don't know if they're legal or not. I see people driving them around. The other thing that is popular here is these ATVs. They're more ATVs than golf carts, but you see both of them on the road.
But no electric ATVs, I don't think.
Not yet. So anyway, things are changing, and I'm hopeful. I had thought before I saw these things at $10,000 that I would die before I drove an EV. Now there's a chance.
Well, and it's interesting too that 50 years ago, all the Japanese stuff was considered inferior, and now they're premium. And
Yes.
similarly, 20 years ago, the Korean stuff was considered inferior, and now it's premium.
Right.
So maybe in 20 years, the Chinese stuff will be premium.
I don't think that'll take 20 years, but certainly you point out some part of the problem with any of these new manufacturers trying to break into the market is the doors to the markets just don't open instantly for any of them. There's that Vietnamese maker VinFast that is, I guess, spending $1 million on a plant in where Kentucky, I think, that is trying to enter the US market with a car that I think is about $30,000. Plus, you have to pay them to lease the battery.
Mhm.
So we'll see how that works out. Now, they say the thing that's good about leasing the battery is you don't have to worry about the battery wearing out or getting damaged. But for the most part, these batteries have a life that's 4 or 5 times longer than the car.
Mhm.
So I'm not sure that's a convincing argument. It doesn't convince me anyway. Okay.
Elon Musk has pointed out it's a lot easier to build a prototype vehicle and show it off and promise some future production than it actually is to make high volume, inexpensive things.
Right. Yes, that's right. But the high volume, inexpensive thing is the thing that can change the world. But it takes a while to get there. It's the first one might seem hard to make, but making the first 100,000 is quite a challenge too. Okay, proceeding now, I'm going to talk about the great progress. And this is, they say, the time has come for a positive reframing of what's really going on in America and the world. there are many slow-moving positive developments that are coming to a head in the next few years. And these are transforming technologies that are ready to scale up to high volume. And these new trends, they say, are leading to the tipping point. And they say, let's call this the story of the great progression. In the next 25 years, we will figure out, they say, how to deal with climate change and transition the bulk of our energy sources from carbon to electric. And this is going to let us transition our transportation systems from internal combustion engines to electric. And we will scale up brand new industries and build a much more environmentally and socially sustainable society. And a part of this that they say that is encouraging is that this will also let us push back on authoritarianism. And the changes that we're going through will be so much that people, even 500 years from now, will look back at our era and marvel at the transformation that we're about to go through. And they say this is not just a nice utopian scenario, it's actually starting to happen and will most likely play out over the next 25 years. And if you look at what's going on, we talk about these stories every week. One of the elements is these mind-boggling new tools like artificial intelligence and the unprecedented knowledge and ability that we're getting to understand and engineer the genomes of all living animals. This is a big deal. Most of us haven't really got this wired into our minds yet, but it's one of the things that's happening. And if you look in the whole world, we have all of these systems and subsystems that work together that make up our modern society. And now many of them are breaking down and causing more trouble than we can stand. And every one of these systems is being superseded by new systems that are better suited for the 21st century. If you look at the beginning of this century, the challenge was terrorism. Now it's climate. The energy was based on carbon. Now it's moving towards clean and renewable. The transportation was based on industrial combustion. Now it's moving to electric. Our culture was based on boomers. We're all boomers. Let's hear it for the boomers. But it's moving to the millennials. Politics has been really conservative since the time of Reagan, and they say it's going to move to progressive. The private sector was the most important 20 years ago, and the public sector is becoming more important. It used to be the shareholder was the most important person in capitalism, and now it's going to move, they say, to the stakeholder. That's a different idea. Work used to be physical, now it's moving to virtual. Production was industrial, and now it is moving more to biological. And in terms of geopolitics, the focus was on the Middle East. That's where we got all the oil from, after all. And now the focus is moving into Asia. And so the shift is happening. The forces are in motion and there's no turning back. The transformation that they're talking about has already begun. And they're talking about moving to tipping points. And the thing about tipping points is when they happen fast. And one day the world works one way, like it always has, and then the next day the world works in a different way. And some of the tipping points we have are easier to see than others. Uh, Tesla has already led the world's legacy auto system around the planet into transition into electric vehicles. Global finance has already tipped in terms of their investments, and they're making massive investments now in solar and wind because it's cheaper. The boomer generation, our generation, is more than half of them are retired now, and many of them have started to die already. And the boomer generation, I think overall, they say is more conservative than we realize. I know I've been on the liberal side, so I don't kind of understand the conservative side of the boomer generation. But if you look since Reagan, we've been in this 40-year period where the conservatives have been ascendant. And what we have coming are the millennials who are 26 to 41, and they're in their prime and working and consuming. And we have Generation Z from 10 to 25 who are pretty much aligned with the millennials. And both of these generations are much more progressive than us old fogey boomers. And the next 25 years will see the introduction and scaling up not of one fundamental new technology, but three that will have historic impact. And this is the energy tech, the next is biotech, and the next is the next big stage of infotech, which will be driven by artificial intelligence. So we are heading into a triple whammy tech boom. And, if you look at the last 25 years, the last 25 years have been largely driven by a single whammy tech boom. And so the next 25 years will have more going on. And again, if you go through the details, the energy tech world has already tipped with the rise in EVs and the rise in renewable power. And added to this, we have the development and deployment of the next generation of nuclear power. And still, even with all of this, in 25 years, some carbon energy for stuff that's not connected to the grid will still be needed, and maybe for some industrial application. So it'll be around, it'll just be have less impact. Now, in biotech, there is the coming biotech boom. And again, if you've been listening to me, I've been saying for years that this is a revolution that is currently underway. And most people underestimate the significance and great progress. If you look at it, the human genome was first cracked only 20 years ago. It took 15 years of work, and the first human genome cost us $2 billion to get. Now you can get your personal genome for $1,000, and they're continuing to work on the technology. And in a few years, it'll be $100. This is a faster increase in capability than Moore's law in the semiconductor industry. So this is happening fast. And besides this, 10 years ago, just 10 years ago, we got the breakthrough known as CRISPR that lets us cheaply edit genomes. And with these things, the biological age has begun. And if you can understand how genomes work and are able to edit them, we have crossed the threshold into true genetic engineering. And the thing is that it's getting deeper than that. We now understand how living things work below the cellular level, within the cell. And we are getting better at this each year. And we are moving into a period of biological engineering. The best name for this is synthetic biology. And we've seen the first wave of genetically modified crops, and there's certainly going to be successive waves that are coming to make the crops more drought resistant, more productive, and more nutritious. And the sustainability imperative will also end up driving things like a dramatic expansion of cultured meat. Beef will be the first that is scaled up because beef is expensive and cows have so much impact on the environment with the methane and the way they use resources. And the bigger play in synthetic biology, if all of those others were not enough, is that things that have traditionally been made through industrial production are going to be made through biological production. Synthetic biology is going to change the world of materials. One example is steel and concrete. Genetically engineered wood, which is stronger, heat resistant, and faster growing, is going to replace steel and concrete in a lot of applications. Or consider plastics. Biologically engineered alternatives will be designed to be able to biodegrade within months instead of years or never. And so much of the action in the biotech boom in the next 25 years will take place in human healthcare. And many of those implications to personal well-being and health and life extension will show up during this time. And then finally, if that's not enough, there is the next generation of infotech boom, stage 2. And one part of it will be another doubling of people in the world who are on the internet. Will add another 3 billion users in the next few years. And the big part of it is that AI is going to come and help us do things that we could never do with our poor, puny human intelligence. And, the business world, the advanced people have been using AI for several years now. Is still very expensive, but this is going to continue to develop and get cheaper and simpler and more available. And people like you and I will be able to have access to it over the web from the cloud. And, you know, an example of what is presently in the pipeline, and they say will be developed and released this year, is simultaneous language translation. So this is AI that can translate any major language into any other major language real time. So you'll be able to communicate basically with any person in the world in real time and have nuanced communication. And if you want to look at where a lot of innovation has come through in the history of the world, it comes through the cross fertilization of ideas and perspectives. And I have to wonder what will be the impact on the availability of these new ideas and perspectives when we have simultaneous language translation, so can have conversations across the world with all of these people. Now, they say together, all of these alignments are coming together to create a different kind of 21st century, a time of abundance. One of the things is with this abundance is the holy grail of energy. Renewable energies like solar and wind are already getting a lot cheaper. They won't take us far enough. The fourth generation of nuclear will help. They won't take us far enough. The game changer in energy is still fusion. And now the companies that are working on it are saying stuff will be released in the 2030s that'll be in production, fusion generators. There are a bunch of startups that are now trying to do it. And this will end up bringing kind of an unexpected level of energy abundance. For example, we'll have the energy to be able to do things like desalination of water. Water is a critical resource in many places of the world, and desalination is expensive because of the energy it uses. With fusion power to power that, then that also may be a issue of the past. Even they say this will affect the way we live in cities. Right now, a third of the city space is devoted to transportation, and the bulk of that is for parking places. And one of the things we have coming are these autonomous vehicles, and we have this generation of the millennials and Gen Z that are already used to calling up Uber when they need to go from one place to another. So they will be easy and ready to adopt these autonomous vehicles that they can use themselves, just call it up from their house, go get in it, use it as they need it, and then let the next user use it. Now, most cars sit parked 95% of the time, and that uses up a lot of space in cities. When you don't need to do this, cities will change as well. Now, with AI, one of the things that's going to happen with AI is it's going to impact medicine, and we're going to be able to have hyper personalized medicine at scale, and your body will start to be continuously monitored through all your devices, so you won't need to have your annual checkup. They're checking you up every few minutes through the stuff that you're wearing on your body. They're building that kind of stuff into clothing etc. So that'll be everywhere. And AI will be able to provide more personalized health service. And then, when you have something that the AI system cannot readily deal with, then you call in the doctor. But a lot of the routine stuff will be able to be handled by AI, where they're monitoring you with the personal monitoring devices. One other place that AI will certainly come into is to make changes in education and higher education. Our education system is really the same as it was hundreds of years ago, depending on people and books and that way of instructing. And AI will be able to provide more personalized learning and help bring down costs. And AI will be able to teach the basics and answer common questions and check homeworks for progress and stuff like that. We still will need teachers, but the teachers will teach the critical and creative components of education. So we need people, but not for doing the routine stuff. We're afraid of what all this is going to do to jobs, but boom times bring an abundance of jobs. And already we're seeing in many places like America, the problem of where do we find enough workers? And AI and robots will handle much of that. And we want robots to do the tedious and dangerous work, like being the fry cook at the fast food place. And people will be able to do the jobs where our talent and creativity are needed. Now, the other way that they see that these changes will happen will be really in politics and culture. American history has shown a pattern of a pendulum swinging back and forth. The conservatives generally want to slow down changes and focus on consolidation and regeneration, whereas progressives value progress and change and are eager to experiment. And this makes progressives better during times of transformative changes like we're moving into. Progressives also value vigorous, effective government and who can help deal with this change. And if you look for us in our lifetime, we had a progressive era that came from the Great Depression, after the Great Depression and World War II, and ran through in the US until the 60s. And then Ronald Reagan in the 80s marked the beginning of the conservative era. Some think the conservative era was over when Trump was defeated in 2020. I think we'll know in 2 weeks, actually, whether the conservative era is over or not. So we'll see. And this, so we see things are tipping in both industry and biology and computers. Maybe politics will tip too. And, if you look at this, we are seeing times that are transformative times ahead of us of progress and system change, though these changes can bring among some people a level of desperation, because some people can't see beyond what they're losing to what they will be gaining. And those people will resist this change to the end. But while we're going through this time of change, then the authoritarian closed systems lose to open systems in the long term, and open systems that encourage free thinking are also tolerant of dissents, and they thrive in the period that are dependent on widespread innovations. And this epic story is starting to unfold around us again. And we are starting to see it today. And for me, this is one of the more positive stories that I've seen about the changes that are underway. It's a story that fits my own kind of instinctive understanding. And so I'm happy to see it being written about and talked about in the world. What do you think? Do you think we're going to have this big time of change coming, or is things turning to shit?
Well, change is inevitable.
Yes.
Personally, I think this was one of the most significant articles I've read in the past year. We see paradigm shifts in individual specialties, but this is such a broad-based paradigm shift that it's going to be really remarkable. I mean, like you pointed out, we're really seeing it starting right now all around us in almost every specialty. I have a sleep number bed, and so during the night it keeps track of my heartbeat and everything. It had they have an anecdotal thing that it is connected to the Mayo Clinic, and they say it has saved some lives because it can register a heart attack going on. But that's just an aside. I think that this is really a big deal, and I think a couple of quotations in it. They said that we've already tipped. It's the tipping point. We've already tipped over in most of these specialties.
Yes.
The debate is over. We're just going ahead now.
And, the problem in going ahead is we have this implementation time, and this implementation of change is messy. Andrew has talked a bunch about the messes that we have in front of us, and I think you're right on.
I copied the article. It was too long to read in one sitting, so I copied it. I noticed that a lot of the things they talk about is the great work they did 25 years ago when they predicted the Great Depression or whatever it was.
Right. It was basically the spreading out of computers and information technology from a small group to real significant use in the world.
They're pretty proud of themselves how they predicted that. So
the
magazine is Wired, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't subscribe to it, but I'm going to try to start reading a little bit more of it.
Well, Wired turns out to be one of the variety of sources that I have coming to me every week. And sometimes they have real good stuff.
One thing, it's nice to read something that's rational and optimistic instead of all this media hype about doom and gloom.
Yes,
So
indeed.
Good. And we have made tremendous progress in the last 200 years. There's a good book by Matt Ridley called The Rational Optimist that points out all of these reductions in death rates and longer living and blah, blah, blah. But one thing that is a concern, I would think, is this decline in STEM education, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And all of these changes that are coming are going to require a population that is steeped in STEM type education. And that's not happening in the West anyway. Maybe it's happening in
not
Asia.
happening in America. If you go in India, for example, a lot of people in their colleges are getting STEM degrees.
Yeah.
One way or another. I think the same thing is happening in China.
The article talks about biological changes in the way we produce the things we consume. But what it doesn't talk about is the hardwired human nature and how little hardwired human nature has changed in the last 50,000 years when you really think about it. And you wonder if our hardwired human nature can adapt quickly enough to this new reality that's coming at us. And the other thing that's perhaps good is they talk about California pioneering these changes. So maybe what we'll be able to see how the experiment works in California.
Right.
And that will give us hope that it'll work everywhere else.
So I think it's an interesting time that we are moving into, and this article should give us hope against all the doom and gloom we hear in the news. I'm glad you brought that point up, Andrew, because if it bleeds, it leads. So what we hear about in the news is all the trouble. And these changes happen, but they start happening gradually. In the 15 years before the first human genome was solved, how many of us heard about any of that?
Yeah.
Okay.
The other thing that is a bit of a concern too is there's still this bell curve of ability. And a lot of this progress is being pushed by the people on the far right-hand end of the bell curve. The super energetic, super talented, super intelligent, and so on. But the majority of the people are on the other end of the bell curve. And what are the rest of us going to become?
Well, you get to watch TV or the internet. You get to watch YouTube and watch cat videos.
Yeah.
Yeah, cat videos are pretty big now.
Yeah. It's alarming that in the US, I think the annual expenditure on pet food is greater than the annual expenditure on cancer research.
Oh, I'm sure. And you make more money on cat food.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we will see. Now, continuing in with technology stories, I have a material story about graphene again. And since graphene is 200 times stronger than steel and a good electrical and thermal conductor, there's been an immense amount of interest in it since it was discovered in 2004. And again, if you think about it, that wasn't that long ago. And the problem with it has been until now, manufacturers have not been able to create graphene in large, scalable, industrial relevant amounts. And new research is solving this problem. And this is going to reinforce, then reinvigorate the interest in graphene. And there are a couple of things that they've done recently that add to that. One is they've shown that graphene coated copper structures can be folded 200,000 times without damage compared to the original copper structures, which started cracking after 20,000 times. So this is going to help create the flexible electronics that makes the kind of sensors that they're talking about in these articles to monitor your body functions, for example. They've also demonstrated that gold coated in graphene can better withstand the sweat in a person's body. And so this is going to make better biosensors and implantable biosensors. And they also can have found that graphene can protect electrical circuits provided by inkjet printers. And again, if you can make electronics and robust electronics with a 3D printer, this simplifies the whole production of electronics. And what they have done now is they have figured out a better, more cost-effective and environmentally friendly way to grow graphene on material. This is plasma enhanced chemical vapor deposition. Vapor deposition has been with us for 50 years and is used heavily in the semiconductor industry. And they use this to grow high quality graphene sheets that are only 1 atom thick, and they do it at room temperature, and it takes about 15 minutes. So you have something that is easy and quick. And this graphene growth method can be scaled up to industrial needs, and they're compatible with a host of other applications. Since they don't need high pressure or high temperature, it can work with many different kind of materials, and it can work with tiny nanostructured metals, the semiconductors, even plastics. And the heart of this is an array of plasma, which is used to activate a gas of hydrogen and methane molecules, and it breaks them down into smaller atomic fragments. And then the material that you want to put graphene on is immersed in the plasma, and in a few minutes the carbon from the gas gets deposited onto the surface into thin atoms that are thin layers, 1 atom thick. And so here you have now the ability to produce graphene in volume and deposit it pretty much on whatever material you want to use it. So we're going to start seeing graphene showing up in many places, in many applications in the world, and it'll be one of the things that makes things smaller, cheaper, more efficient, and more reliable. So let's hear it for graphene. And again, this particular development is, I think, key to graphene's moving out into the production areas in a much broader way, because it solves the problem they had. How do you make it? Graphene is cool, but how do you make it?
So how do you make it?
Again, here you make it using a plasma and using vapor deposition. So you make a plasma gas of carbon, and then you stick the stuff in it that you want to have graphinated, and it makes the graphene on it.
It
And
sort of
again,
rains out, if you will.
so again, it's a good way to do it. And the fact that you can do it at room temperature means you don't need a special environment or any of this stuff.
Well, and the interesting bit here was that graphene is used in combination with other materials.
Yes,
And-
yes,
And that's
exactly.
the novel part of what they're saying.
So the astronomy story today is actually, I think, a sad story. Arecibo was destroyed by a hurricane that hit Puerto Rico 2 years ago. And Arecibo has been on the forefront of a number of findings in astronomy, including things like helping to find the first exoplanets. They've used it a lot to try to find extraterrestrial life, but so far no luck. And the scientists had hoped that the U.S. National Science Foundation, NSF, was going to rebuild it, but instead the agency recently announced that it was not going to rebuild it. Instead, it was going to establish an educational center for STEM education. That's good, Andrew, right? So they're going to use it for STEM education. But the astronomers say that the fact that they're not going to rebuild it is heartbreaking. The NSF puts a positive spin on it, though. So they say, we're not closing Arecibo. We think this new approach and the new center will be catalytic in many areas. Arecibo was, during its time, the largest radio telescope. It was 305 meters wide and had been operating for more than half a century. And one of the things, besides exoplanets, it also was instrumental in finding the first gravitational waves. The NSF, though, had been trying to wind down investment in Arecibo since 2006 and start funding newer astronomical facilities. So I think they took this opportunity to wind it all the way down. And goodbye, Arecibo. I have memories of many discoveries that came from it. Now it's just a pile of junk in Puerto Rico. And now moving to biology, Oxford University have found that goldfish have good memories. And so scientists have proved that goldfish have good memories and are able to navigate their surroundings. A team at Oxford trained 9 goldfish to travel 70 centimeters and back, receiving a food reward at the end. They put them in a narrow tank covered with a repeating pattern of vertical stripes every 2 centimeters. And then the researchers set them going. And when the fish reached a set distance, the fish were prompted by something like a researcher waving their hand over the water to turn around and swim back to the start. where they got their food reward. And then the researchers tested if the fish would swim the same distance and turn around to their if the starting position was changed and the cue was changed. They also tested if the goldfish would swim the same distance when the background pattern was altered. And 8 out of the 9 goldfish did just fine. There was one goldfish on the edge of the curve that Andrew was talking about who didn't make the challenge. But it showed that the fish continued to swim the correct distance even when the start position was changed. So these goldfish know more than you think. And if you want to insult somebody, you have to no longer insult them saying you're as dumb as a goldfish. Okay, so now I have a story that was actually came to me from Bob Coaches, and it was a response to a recent talk at UU about vegetarianism. And it turns out that humans have been apex predators for about 2 million years. The apex predators ate everything and ate a lot of meat. And so Paleolithic cuisine was anything but lean and green. For 2 million years at least, Homo sapiens and our ancestors have eaten heavily a diet of meat, putting us on top of the food chain. And it's not quite the balanced diet of berries, grain, and meat that people think of when they think of paleo food. They first, there were many studies that have been made, and it said that we were primarily apex predators until about 12,000 years ago. This was the beginning of the period of agricultural and animal husbandry. And they've tried to use chemical analysis of bones and tooth enamel and tried to extrapolate based on looking at the behavior of current hunter-gatherer society to determine what people ate 2 million years ago. But this doesn't work very well as a methodology. Too much has changed. The entire ecosystem has changed and the conditions can't be compared. So the researchers instead turn to evidence that is embedded in our bodies and compare that to our closest primate cousins. And human behavior changes fast, but evolution is slow. The body remembers, and we can use the body then to infer some things. Compared with other primates, our bodies need more energy per unit of body mass, especially when it comes to our energy hungry human brains. I first started to learn about this in my 20s when I was wondering what's a natural diet for humans. And I looked in anthropology, and one of the things I found out is about 2 million years ago, the human brains got so big that it grew after birth. This doesn't happen with animals. That's why the young colt can stand just a few minutes after birth, and it takes human beings months to be able to do that. And so the human brain grows significantly after birth, and to do that growth requires fat, oils, are key to that growth. And so if the mother doesn't have enough oil in her diet, the baby's brain is not going to grow. So because of that, I knew starting 2 million years ago that this meat eating, I guess then mainly being a scavenger, was key to being a human being. And the human brain uses an enormous amount of energy. With 2% of the body mass, the human brain uses about 20% of the body's energy. We have higher fat reserves and can make use of them by turning fat into ketones when the need comes for energy. Other omnivores have fat cells that are few but large, and ours are small and numerous, like those of a predator. Predators eat meat. Our digestive systems are also like those of a predator, having strong stomach acids, which is just the thing you need to break down the proteins and to kill the harmful bacteria when you were eating a week-old mammoth meat. And even our genomes point to a heavier reliance on a meat-rich diet. Genetics have concluded that areas of the human genome were closed off, made inactive to enable a fat-rich diet, while in chimpanzees, areas of the genome were opened up to enable a sugar-rich diet. So the human diet has been a lot more meat-based than people may realize. The scientists who are doing this research say none of this is to say that we should eat more meat, but knowing how our ancestors ate maybe has an impact in our understanding of what is good for us. So eat your meat, maybe it's not so bad. Carol and I have moved to a more plant-based diet, though, in the last year. And part of the reason it turns out a more plant-based diet is still better for your heart than eating all that meat. And I was concerned about it because of my diabetes and kidney disease, but I did it with the knowledge of my doctor, and those things are actually better now on a more plant-based diet. We still eat meat, but it's only 2 or 3 days a week instead of every day.
Yeah, there's a good book by Vaclav Smil, S-M-I-L, called Should We Eat Meat? And he goes through all the physiology of all this stuff. And it turns out that we do need meat, but we only need about 200 grams a week instead of 2,000 grams a day kind of thing.
Right. And it turns out still for the brain, there's an amino acid choline that you get mainly through things like eggs that are needed for the brain now. And if you don't have it in the diet, you start to develop cognitive problems. And they have seen these cognitive problems in some vegans.
What's surprising is all those Indians that are total vegetarians that seem to do quite well.
But Indians I knew were not total vegetarians. I saw lots of chickens around and lots of cows, and the cows are raised for milk, not meat.
Oh, so maybe they're getting their protein from
Right.
From milk.
So they're getting So they're not vegans, they're vegetarians. And I saw, while I was in India, I saw eggs in a lot of the dishes as well. Okay. last story is about Pfizer, and Pfizer says they're going to hike the price of COVID vaccine in the U.S. to $110 to $130 per dose. The U.S. government presently pays about $30 per dose. What they are forecasting is the number of doses given around the world are going to reduce, and they're going to be much more like the level of flu vaccines. So with lower use, they'll have lower production, and with lower production, costs go up. So I don't know what it's going to be for other vaccines or other places. And I hope that some of the companies that are in the vaccine business might do it for public service instead of as a profit line for their business.
Keep dreaming.
No, what's the major vaccine manufacturer in Pune? Richard, it's one of the largest vaccine producers in the world. In
That's
Pune,
right.
India.
So,
And they manufacture for public good, not
Is
for
that-
profit.
right,
Is
right.
that Moderna or?
No.
No,
No,
it's,
no.
it's an Indian company. I can't remember its name. But they're, like Norman says, they're the largest vaccine maker in the world. And I think the reason they're doing it is India has among the largest populations in the world, and there are lots of people that can get sick otherwise. So there you actually have a government and a company doing stuff for the public good instead of to make a buck. What a crazy idea those Indians have. Okay, that's what we got for the week.
There
And
is a pharmaceutical company in Pune called Purna. Whether it's the one you're talking about, I don't know.
yeah, that name doesn't ring a bell, but I don't really know. Anyway, thank you for joining me today. And that's what we got. And I'll see you next week.
Okay, sorry I was late.
Adios, amigos.
Adios.